Hello, everybody. This is Jimmy, and you're reading with Jimmy. We're reading the Meditations of Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antonius, otherwise known as Marcus Aurelius, and this is meditation number 2, translated by George Long, one of the great translators. So we finished with meditation number 1, which is on the page on the left. And so hopefully you read that with me and read the analysis, so you got a little background now on Marcus Aurelius and when he's writing these meditations. Meditation number 2. Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, the arrogant, deceitful, envious, and unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil. That's an amazing thought. I want you to think about this. I don't know if we'll analyze every meditation, but we will analyze periodically the meditations. But in this case, begin the morning by saying to thyself, remember, this is diary narration, first-person narration. Marcus Aurelius writing in his meditations to himself, I shall meet with busybodies, ungrateful people, arrogant people, because these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil. So in other words, translated, that means if you know the difference between good and evil, you're not a busybody, ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, or unsocial. We could spend an hour discussing these two sentences, but we'll go on. But I have seen the nature of the good, that it is beautiful, and of the bad, that it is ugly, and the nature of him who does wrong, and that it is akin to me. Remember the brackets, what we talked about with the brackets, when George uses brackets, he's inserting a word in there that he doesn't necessarily see in the Greek language that he's translating from Marcus Aurelius. So that is akin to me, not of the same blood or seed, but that it participates in intelligence and portion of divinity. So I can read it with the brackets. That is akin to me, not only of the same blood or seed, but that it participates in the same intelligence and the same portion of the divinity. In other words, we're all alike. And I can neither be injured by any of them, for no one can fix on me what is ugly, nor can I be angry with my kinsman, nor hate him. Remember, part of what we learn about Marcus being a Stoic is that he really is not, if you remember the 55 things we talked about in the analysis, he wants to control his temper. He doesn't necessarily hate anybody. These are important things. So he's saying when he meets with these, now why would he meet with someone who's deceitful? Well, because he's the emperor, right? He's a commander. He's the leader. And he meets with all types of people, as you and I do in our life, don't we? We meet with all types of people. And he's saying basically these people are like that because they don't know the difference. For we are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and the lower teeth. And George puts a footnote here. Xenophon memories. This is from a book, right? So he's saying, like, you have 2 feet, hands, you handshake, the left hand and the right hand together. To act against one another, then, is contrary to nature. And it is acting against one another to be vexed and to turn away. Isn't that interesting? Jimmy, did you say that he's fighting the barbarians for 15 years and killing a lot of people? Isn't that acting against another person? Well, he's fighting a war, right? He's a commander. He's an emperor, warrior. He's talking here about talking to people and dealing with people. You think he's angry when he fights the barbarians, or is he defending his homeland, Rome? Or is he, he conquered some of the barbarian territory and they're just trying to take it back? You see, you can get in arguments all day long, but let's just try to understand what Marcus is saying in this first meditation of the second meditation, number 1. So he's basically said, don't get angry at anything. And, we're made to act together. Number 2, whatever this is that I am, it is a little flesh and breath and the ruling part. What do you think he means by that? Whatever this, that's a pronoun, this, he's talking about himself. Whatever this is that I am, it's flesh, breath, and the ruling part. What do you think the ruling part is here, ladies and gentlemen? Can you guess? Throw away thy books. No longer distract thyself. It is not allowed. But as if thou wast now dying, despise the flesh. It is blood and bones and a network, a conjecture of nerves and veins and arteries. And you think that they only discovered what people are in these days. But look he uses the word artery, veins, nerves. And so he's basically, he's chiding himself. Don't throw away your books. Don't get distracted, right? Despise the flesh. Remember, one of the things in the 55 is what? Abstinence. Abstinence. See the breath also, what kind of thing it is. Air, and not always the same. But every moment sent out and again sucked in. Did you ever think about your breath? Let's take a breath together. I mean, we breathe and we don't even know. It's just taken for granted, right? We don't study our breath. There was a play called Breath, written by, can't think of his name now, but I will. He won a Pulitzer Prize for it. He wrote Waiting for Godot. But Breath, this curtain opened and there was a bunch of junk on the stage and there was a breath. Then the curtain closed and that was the end of the play. I'm telling you. And he won a Pulitzer Prize for that. Hold on a second. Jimmy's walking over. Samuel Beckett. You have to walk over to his library for a moment. Samuel Beckett. How can I forget Samuel Beckett? Because I'm reading Marcus Aurelius and my mind is so overwhelmed with Marcus Aurelius. So air is not always the same. You remember? John Donne, what will kill us if not a virus will, if not a breath of air will, if not breathing will? There's a great poem by John Donne. It's called The Flea, F-L-E-A. We take our breath for granted, but here's a guy in the middle of war, 15 years of fighting. He's thinking about his breath. The third then is the ruling part. He gave us those 3 parts in the beginning, right? Flesh, right? And then the third part, the ruling part. Consider this. Thou art an old man. No longer let this be a slave. This. What is this? No longer be pulled by the strings like a puppet to unsocial movements. No longer be either dissatisfied with thy present lot or shrink from the future. I'm going to conjecture and say that other part, the ruling part, is yourself, your soul, whatever is guiding you inside of you. You're you. In Alice in Wonderland, which we read on this website, the Cheshire Cat asks Alice, who are you? Who are you? Well, that's your ruling part. And he's saying, thou art. Who's thou? Sorry. Who's thou in this sentence? Thou. Who's thou? It's him. It's Marcus. He's saying, you're an old man. So don't let yourself be a slave to yourself and be pulled by strings like a puppet to unsocial movements, or dissatisfied with your present lot, or be afraid of the future. What do you think the future, if he's an old man, the future is, in fact, death. This is a tremendous meditation, this number two, this second meditation, the second entry. Number 3, all that is from the gods is full of providence. That which is from fortune is not separated from nature or without an interweaving and invulsion with the things which are ordered by providence. Do you know what providence is? All that is from the gods, all that comes from the gods, he believed in multiple gods, is full of providence. I'm going to leave it up to you to define providence. What is providence? Some people think that's God, fate, whatever. So he's saying that is from fortune, isn't separated. Nothing is separated for it, which is ordered by providence. So providence provides order to the world. And from thence, from all of that, all things flow. And there is besides necessity, and that which is for the advantage of the whole universe, of which thou, you, me, him, art a part. We're part of this. We're not separated from it. This is another discussion we can spend an hour on. Because the alienation of man happened, it happens that people feel alienated. But what he's telling himself in this entry is that he's part of all of this. He's part of it. You're a part of it. Well, Jimmy, I don't necessarily believe that. I feel alone. Well, because man is alone in his mind. He seems to be, we can't know each other's mind. But being alive, we are part of the world. But that is good for every part of nature which the nature of the whole brings, and what serves to maintain this nature. The whole and the parts, you've heard that? Now, the universe is preserved, as by the changes of the elements, so by the changes of things compounded of the elements. Heraclitus, the great Greek philosopher, which he'll refer to I think he's already referred to it in the number 1, if I'm not mistaken. Heraclitus was a philosopher, and he said all things are changing. The river, it's like life is like a river flowing. It's never, ever, ever the same. And he was influenced by Heraclitus, among other people. Not only that, you think some things are the same. And if you read those 55 things in our analysis, you'll notice that there's a lot of things that are going on today that, this never happened, when in fact it already happened, and he's talking about it. Think about what he's thinking about. Think about what he's thinking about. Let these principles be enough for thee. For thee, who's thee? Him. Let them always be fixed opinions. But cast away the thirst after books. In other words, he's an avid reader, but he's saying, get away from that, the thirst for books, that thou mayest not die murmuring, but cheerfully, truly, and from thy heart, thankful from the gods. I think one of the books we should read, I'm taking a note now, is Faust. F-A-U-S-T. F-A-U-S-T. Okay? We're going to read Faust. That's a good story. That's a guy who sold his soul to the devil, if you like devil stories. Cast away the thirst, and so you won't die murmuring. Ooh, life sucks. Right? You don't want to die murmuring, but die cheerfully, truly, and from thy heart, thankful from the gods. In a way, he's kind of trying to talk himself into not being afraid of dying. Isn't it? What do you think? Okay. All right. There's a note up here I put, no longer be dissatisfied with the present or shrink from the future. The line I just read to you is Stoic philosophy. Stoicism teaches individuals should accept the present moment without complaining and not fear the unknown future, because there's nothing you can much do about it. The philosophy emphasizes living in accordance with nature and maintaining composure, never losing your cool, your temper, and focusing on what is within our control rather than being preoccupied with things we can't change. Never die murmuring. Don't die murmuring. Oh, I wish I could change that. No, you can't. There's things you can change. And what you'll do is you'll drive yourself nuts if you try to change the only thing, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't learned that by now, the only thing you can change is yourself. That's the only thing. Most people miss that fact. Well, Jimmy, what about a building? I can change the building. I can remodel a building. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about remodeling. We're talking about philosophical principles about the self, about you, about how you lead your life. And Marcus Aurelius believes, this is his diary telling himself while he's fighting these barbarians, right? He's at war, that you should die cheerfully, not murmuring. Jimmy@email.jimmy.com. I know you're going to have questions about this, and we can debate this I've already started some email debates with some people, and I appreciate that very much. Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. Maybe we'll have a forum one day. 4, remember how long thou hast been putting off these things, and how often thou hast received an opportunity from the gods, and yet dost not use it. Don't put off tomorrow for what you could do today. You heard that modern statement. Well, this guy lived way before that happened. You can Google it if you'd like. And he had that thought away. Remember how long you've been putting off these things, and how often that thou hast received an opportunity from the gods. He looks at, Duke Ellington said, a problem is a chance to show your best. Duke Ellington, if you're a jazz aficionado, Duke Ellington was a jazz guy. A problem is a chance to show your best. Okay? Thou must now at last perceive of what universe thou art a part, and of what administrator of the universe thy existence is a flux. What is a flux? The flowing out of a particular substance, your universe, your existence is flowing out. And that a limit of time is fixed for thee, which if thou dost not use for clearing away the clouds from thy mind, it will go, and thou wilt go, and it will never return. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the reasons I appreciate you reading with Jimmy, because you'll never get this time back if you've stuck with me all this time. Neither will I. I will never get over 100 hours now, at least, in spending time reading this with you. So what I've tried to do in readingwithjimmy.com is really give you the benefit of the study of classic literature that helped me lead my life. And so we're all given a limited amount of time. We don't know how much time that is. We don't know. And, some people will never come across this website. Some people will know. And, the world may, who knows? The sun may blow up and we'll all be gone. Who knows? But to me, this is worth it to share this with you and have you think about yourself. Because time, ladies and gentlemen, is the only non-renewable resource in the world. You'll renew a tree, you can plant a tree, you can, everything is renewable. Everything is renewable. Well, plastic isn't. Well, I beg your pardon? Of course it is these days. You just recycle it and they use it someplace else. There's floors made of plastic, for Christ's sake. Your time, the time you spend, the time you have, is the only non-renewable resource that you have. So spend it wisely. Don't hang up on me. Don't stop reading unless you want to. Number 5, every moment think steadily as a Roman and a man to do what thou hast in hand with perfect and simple dignity and feeling of affection and freedom and justice, and give it thyself relief from all other thoughts. You can substitute anything you want for Roman. Every moment think steadily as a person to do what you have in hand. Do what you have to do with perfect and simple dignity and feeling of affection, freedom, and justice, and give yourself relief from all other thoughts. Don't think about anything else. I used to have an art director who said multitasking is impossible. And he was right. I didn't believe him at the time. But after reflection and trying some things, I can only do this. You heard me just get up a moment ago and go to my library and grab Samuel Beckett's name off the cover of one of the many, many, many books I have of Samuel Beckett. This because it escaped my mind. So I had to go look for it, and I had to stop for a moment and walk over. Fortunately, my library is right here in the room where I'm recording. But when you're tasked with doing things, when you're interrupted with other thoughts, you're going to make a mistake. I'm telling you right now. So focus and be involved in the thing. Let the thing be the thing. What the hell are you talking about? Let the thing be the thing. Let the thing be the thing. What you're doing. Don't think about anything else. And thou wilt give thyself relief if thou dost every act, doest, of thy life as if it were the last. Do everything you're doing like it's the last thing you'll do. Think about this thought. What? How the hell is that possible, Jimmy? What if I just go into the store for some milk? Well, what if it was the last thing you'll ever do? What if it was? You don't know if it will be, right? I don't have the crystal ball. You don't have the crystal ball. So you have to act like as if every moment means it. Zorba the Greek is a good story about do you live like you'll never die? Or do you live like you're going to die any moment? There's a big difference in that philosophy. Act as if this were the last thing you were going to do. Well, Jimmy, I can't see myself reading with Jimmy as the last thing. Well, hopefully not. Hopefully you'll go out and do something, right, with your life. That's why we're reading together. Laying aside all careless and passionate aversion from the commands of reason and all the hypocrisy and self-love and discontent with the portion which has been given to thee. Put all that and just do the thing you're doing. That's such an interesting thought, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? How can you appreciate a sunset? Well, Jimmy, I've appreciated many sunsets. Of course you have. Hopefully you have. Sometimes you haven't, right? Sometimes you're too busy, right? Remember one of his 55. Don't pretend you're busy. Stop what you're doing. As one of my Latin teachers said, smell the coffee. Smell the coffee. Thou seest how few things are, seest how few the things are, the which, if a man lays hold of, he is able to live a life which flows in quiet. And it is like an existence of the gods. There's not much that you can lay hold of where you're going to allow peace and quiet. For the gods on their part will require nothing more from him who observes these things. There's a saying in Christian religion that God will give you only the things you can handle. And so sometimes we think when we get things we can't handle, death in the family, something, we think that's, this is crazy. Why did this happen? And basically, Marcus Aurelius is saying that you should relish everything that happens to you. Everything, no matter if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Try to understand that thing. The thing is the thing. Do wrong to thyself, do wrong to thyself. This is an interesting line. There's a footnote here by George Long, pardon me. Perhaps it should be, thou art doing violence to thyself. And he gives you the Greek. Wouldn't it be interesting to read Greek in the original so you can decide which is right? But that's not the point. The point is he repeats this to himself. Do wrong to thyself. Do wrong to thyself. My soul. But thou wilt no longer have an opportunity of honoring thyself. So if you do wrong to yourself, you will no longer have the opportunity of honoring yourself. Every man's life is sufficient. There's you see these little notes here? I'll be darned if I can find what the reference is, because it's not anywhere down here, is it? You don't see it down here. I don't see it down here. So we'll just fix every man's life is sufficient. In other words, you have what you have, but thine, Marcus Aurelius's life is nearly finished, though thy soul reverences not itself, but places thy felicity in the souls of others. Felicity, right? He puts his trust in others. He's an older guy now. He's facing up to his old age. We all get old, and if you're 20-something and reading this, you think you're going to live forever. And maybe you will. I don't know what science is going to bring. I don't care. Who wants to live forever? 7. Do the things external which fall upon thee distract thee? Remember, Marcus is talking to himself, right? He's writing these meditations to himself. He's not writing them for you, for me, to be published. These are his thoughts to himself on the battlefield. Do the things external, outside, which fall upon thee distract you? Give thyself time to learn something new and good, and cease to be whirled around. Stop letting outside things interfere with your thinking. But then thou must also avoid being carried about the other way. For those too are triflers who have wearied themselves in life by their activity. Triflers. I'm surprised I didn't highlight that. And yet they have no object to which to direct every movement and, in a word, all of their thoughts. In other words, they trifle with everything. They let little things bother them. And they therefore upset you and make little things bother you. They're triflers. So he's saying if outside things bother you, stop the madness. Don't let them. Through not observing what is in the mind of another man, has seldom been seen to be unhappy. Through not observing what is in the mind of another man, has seldom been seen to be unhappy. But those who do not observe the movements of their own minds must of necessity be unhappy. Can I tell you, this is probably one of the most astute observations that Marcus Aurelius did. Those who do not observe the movements of their own minds must of necessity be unhappy. And why is that? Because of the first clause. You can't observe in the mind of another man who's unhappy. In other words, if a person's unhappy, you don't know. Even if a person's not unhappy, you don't know if he's happy or unhappy just by looking at him, right? We don't have clear heads where you can see what another person's thinking. I talk about this in several of the books we've read together. It'd be nice if we could. There's actually a Twilight Zone where one of the characters can read the thoughts of other people. Yes, Jimmy watches television sometimes. Those who do not observe the movements of their own mind must be unhappy. Think about what you are doing. More importantly, why you are doing what you're doing. Number 9. This Marcus, must always bear in mind. This is what you must bear in mind. What is the nature of the whole? And what is my nature, and how this nature is related to the whole, that, and what kind of part it is of which kind of a whole, and that there is no one who hinders thee, you, him, from always doing and saying the things which are in according to the nature of which thou art a part. Think about who you are in relationship to what's around you. There is nothing stopping you from acting according to your nature. Nothing. So if you're a jerk, you're going to act like a jerk. If you're a good person, you're going to act like a good person. I'm just telling you, I told you in the beginning that this thing would change your life. Maybe some of you still don't believe me. That's not relevant. Because what is relevant is what this guy said to himself so many years ago. And I'm so grateful it lasted, and for George to be able to translate it. Think about this. Think about these things he's telling us. Theopratus, in his comparison of bad acts, such a comparison as one would make in accordance with the common notions of mankind, says, like a true philosopher, that the offenses which are committed through desire are more blamable than those which are committed through anger. This is a philosopher who says the things you commit through desire you're more blamable for that than when you're committing offenses through anger. And isn't that the truth? Right? Offenses committed through desire. You slap somebody. Are you angry, or did you just want to slap them? We're going to read Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground one day. Maybe it's up at the website already if you're coming in at or whatever, because I'm reading and posting constantly. That's a wonderful story that talks about this very thing. Why do you take offense? For he who is excited by anger seems to turn away from reason. Tell me that's not the truth. If you watch boxing, when the boxer loses control, right? When he loses control and he gets angry, when he gives way to his passion, his anger, he loses control. He turns away from reason and he loses control of the fight. The minute you do that, the minute you get angry, anger is a horrible but understandable human thing. We all get angry. But what do we do when we get angry? Do we give in to the anger? Or do we let the anger, take over us? Jimmy's dad was an alcoholic, and one day, when Jimmy was 17, he fell off the wagon. And when he got cured, he went for the cure. He came back, and Jimmy had a conversation with him. And he said, I said to my father, so you mean to tell me you take one drink and that's it? He says, yes. It was an interesting conversation between father and son. I'm surprised he didn't smack me. I know he wanted to smack me. He had to look. Because he's embarrassed. I mean, he's an alcoholic, right? And I know about it because it's in my genetics too. We'll talk about that some other time. And I said, do you control? So you're saying what's in that bottle controls you? You don't control it, right? He says, yes. That was a stunning admission. I never forgot that conversation, used it subsequently. And it's the same thing with anger. Do you let anger control you, or do you control your anger? And we all fall off the wagon. Let's admit it, right? With a certain pain and unconscious contraction. But he who offends through desire, being overpowered by pleasure, seems to be in a manner more intemperate and more womanish in his offenses. He takes offenses more. Now, people are going to say, Jimmy, that's sexist. You can't talk about it like that. Men and women are equal. Well, they're equal, but they're not the same. What does that mean? I mean just what I said. Men are men and women are women. Well, what about transgender? We won't talk about that. We don't want to talk about that. We're talking, this is Marcus Aurelius. Stay in the story. Just think about his time. Well, didn't they have homosexuality and that kind of thing and bestiality over in the Roman Empire? Of course they did. But we're talking about Marcus Aurelius. And he's saying when you give offense, that are offenses, right, which are committed through desire, they're more blamable. You're just more blamable. You're overpowered by pleasure. Remember, part of his journey is abstinence. Rightly then, and in a way worthy of philosophy, who's he? Theropratus, right? That philosopher, right? He said, so you can see that Marcus is studying this guy, right? He said that the offense which is committed with pleasure is more blamable than that which is committed with pain, with anger. You know what a sociopath is, right? Takes pleasure in pain. Pleasure is an interesting concept. Well, we could spend an hour on that, right? And when you're angry, you're not feeling pleasure. You're just pissed off. And yet, sometimes, as Dostoevsky says, it's nice to break things, right? Sometimes it's nice to break things. Well, that could be another hour of discussion. But think about what he's saying. The pleasure is more blamable than that which is committed with pain. When you're feeling pleasure, it's more offensive, isn't it? And on the whole, the one is more like a person who has been first wronged and through pain is compelled to be angry. But the other is moved by his own impulse to do wrong, being carried away towards doing something by desire, right? The other one is moved by the impulse to do wrong, rather than anger. So he's saying when you lose your temper and you make an offense, you're not as guilty as a guy who decides to do offense on purpose. Well, Jimmy, I don't believe that. Well, that's your right, but it's the truth. And therein lies the difference, ladies and gentlemen, between good and evil. Because when you do things on purpose, when you hurt someone on purpose, not through anger, but on purpose, what the F good are you? Seriously, what good are you when you take pleasure in causing pain? I'm just saying, since it is possible that thou mayst depart from life this very moment, regulate every act and thought accordingly. And there's a couple of footnotes on this one sentence. George says it, or it may mean, since it is in thy power to depart. I don't know what that means, which gives a somewhat different meaning. Of course it does. But he's just saying this is or. I would believe what he wrote here in the translation. Since it's possible you can leave life this very moment, something can happen to you. Regulate every act and thought accordingly. See Cicero. Cicero is a great orator. I could have looked this up for you. Maybe I will in the next meditation, or you can look it up yourself. So he's giving credit, George's, of where possibly Marcus Aurelius got this thought. But to go away from among men, if there are gods, it is not a thing to be afraid of, for the gods will not involve thee in evil. This is an extremely interesting thought to Jimmy. Okay, if you go away from among men, if you go away from if you're no longer with other people, and if there are gods, he doesn't know for sure that there are gods. If there are gods, it is not a thing to be afraid of, for the gods will not involve thee in evil. He's saying that if they're gods, they're not going to They're not going to involve us in evil. But, there's the eternal but. If indeed they do not exist, who's they? The gods. Or if they have no concern about human affairs, what is it to me to live in a universe devoid of gods or devoid of providence? This is an extremely important point. I keep saying that, and I'm sorry for being redundant. But he's basically saying if there are no gods, right? And if they have no, but if indeed they do not exist, or they don't give a crap about us, what is it to me to live in a universe devoid of them? What is it to me to live in a world without gods? This is what's called introspection and self-argument, because I want you to pay attention to the next sentence, please. So basically, he's starting here that if there are gods, and if there are no gods, but in truth, by the way, here's a footnote on who this philosopher is. Okay, was Aristotle's close colleague. He hung around Aristotle, this guy. Aristotle is a great philosopher. We're going to read some of Aristotle. But in truth, they do exist. Aha. They do exist. And they do care for human things. And they have put all the means in man's power to enable him not to fall into real evils. There are some people in the audience who I'm sure are atheists and don't believe in gods or God or whatever. But Marcus Aurelius does. And we're trying to understand Marcus Aurelius in order to lead our life. So do you debate in your own mind if there is or there aren't, or there is not God, or there are gods or no gods? This is what he calls thinking about it in your own, controlling your own mind. We read about that earlier in this meditation, right? A man, a woman who doesn't use their mind to think, it's just no good, right? But he believes in him. And as to the rest, if there was anything evil, they would have provided for this also, and that it should be altogether in a man's power not to fall in it. So if there is evil, the gods gave us evil too, it should be in our power not to do evil. We can argue all day about what evil is. Now that which does not make a man worse, how can it make a man's life worse? But neither through ignorance nor having the knowledge, but not the power to guard against or correct these things, is it possible that the nature of the universe has overlooked them? Nor is it possible that it has made so great a mistake, either through want of power or want of skill, that good and evil should happen indiscriminately to the good and the bad? In other words, is he saying this is all bullshit and chance? But death certainly, and life, honor and dishonor, pain, pleasure, all these things equally happen to good men and bad. Good people, if you want to be less sexist these days, but he's talking about men because men were different than women, still are. But in those days, women didn't have the vote. All these things equally happen to good men and bad, being things which make us neither better nor worse. Therefore, they are neither good nor evil. The choice is yours, ladies and gentlemen. That's what he's saying. Neither good nor evil we can spend 3 hours on that topic. Number 12. How quickly all things disappear. In the universe, the bodies themselves, but in time, even the remembrance of them. What is the nature of all sensible things, and particularly those which attract with the bait of pleasure, or terrifying by pain, or are noised abroad by vapory fame? How worthless and how contemptible and sordid and perishable and dead that these things are. All of this, it is part of the intellectual faculty to observe. We can observe this through our intellect. Pleasure, the bait of pleasure, right? He's saying how quickly things disappear in the remembrance of them. Here today, gone tomorrow, whose opinions and voices, to observe too, who these are, whose opinions and voices give reputation. What death is, and the fact that if a man looks at it himself, at itself, and by the abstract power of reflection, see, there's a lot of thought that he has about what? Death. Why death? Well, he's a warrior, and he's fighting barbarians for 15 years. Every day he thinks about death. Every day he goes out to fight him, and every day he may not come back. What a way to live, or is that the only way to live? That when you leave your home for work, you may never come back, regardless of your job. Regardless of your job. Whether you're in marketing, sales, police work, regardless of your job. You don't know. You don't know what death is. And the man looks at it itself, and by the abstract power of reflection, resolves into their parts of all things, which present themselves to the imagination in it. He will then consider it to be nothing else than an operation of nature. In other words, everybody dies. It's a fact of nature. And if anyone is afraid of an operation of nature, he's a child. In other words, what the hell are you afraid of? It's an act of nature. I can't imagine this guy's mindset. Can you? Can you imagine not being afraid of death? Can you imagine that? I want to do a sidebar here, but I'm going to save it for the analysis about Kirillov, a character in Dostoevsky. This, however, is not only an operation of nature. What's this? What is this? Do you know what this is? This, however, death, but it is also a thing which conduces to the purposes of nature. It conduces to the purposes of nature. It's part of nature. It helps nature. To observe, too, how man comes near to the deity and by what part of him, and when this part of man is so disposed. I want to stop there, but I got to finish this second meditation. This is unbelievable. Well, Jimmy, haven't you read this before? Many times. But every time I read it, it makes so much more sense to me. Number 13, nothing is more wretched than a man who traverses everything and around and pries into the things beneath the earth, as the poet says, and he says the poet is Pindar, and seeks by conjecture what is in the minds of his neighbors without perceiving that it is sufficient to attend to the demon within him and to reverence it sincerely. In other words, mind your own business. Nothing is more wretched than the guy who traverses everything and around and pries into the things, and he's trying to figure out what the hell, is in the minds of other people. And reverence of the demon. The demon, this is demon. We all have our demons, don't we? And reverence of the demon consists in keeping it pure from passion and thoughtlessness and dissatisfaction with what comes from gods and men. You didn't know you can have a good demon, did you? You think the word demon means, it's the devil. Well, you could say it's a spirit, it's an angel, whatever, because angels were devils in Christian, right? In Christian theology. For the things from the gods merit veneration for their excellence, and the things from men should be dear to us by reason of kinship, and sometimes even in a manner that they move our pity by reason of men's ignorance of the good and the bad. This defect, what defect is that? Not being able to tell good from bad. He's saying things from the gods should be venerated. things from men should be because we are all together, men and women, right? We share kinship. But in sometimes, they move our pity because of men's ignorance. So this defect being not less than that, which deprives us from the power of distinguishing things that are black and white, that are white and black. So what is he talking about here? This defect, good and bad, black and white, it deprives us from the power of distinguishing these things. When you lose your moral compass, when you can't discern good from bad, I would say you're pretty screwed up. Though thou should be going to live 3,000 years, look at this, and as many times 10,000 years, still remember, no man loses any other life than this which he now has, nor does he live any other than this which he now loses. Can you imagine anything more profound? The longest and shortest are thus brought to the same end. If you saw a lonesome dove, Robert Duvall had a great philosophy when they were crossing it and some of those cowboys died in the river. And he said, some live longer than others. Some have a short life and some have a long life. The longest and shortest are thus brought to the same end. For the present is the same to all, though that which perishes is not the same. And so that which is lost appears to be a mere moment. He puts a footnote here, see Gattaker's note. Gattaker was another translator. I didn't look him up. I should have looked him up. You can look him up, but I'm not going to look him up. Perishes, for it is not the same. So that which is lost appears to be just a moment. For a man cannot lose either the past or the future. For what a man has not, how can anyone take this from him? The past, the present, and the future are the concepts he's talking about here. So basically what he says, the longest and the shortest are the same. For the present is the same to all. The now. The past is the past, the future is the future. Jean-Paul Sartre, a French writer, wrote a book called Nausea, where the writer of there experienced nausea when he was trying to figure out what was the present. In other words, he was starting to write a biography. He was writing a biography of someone. And as he wrote, he was trying to look at the ink he was writing on and figure out what is the present? What is the now? Because what the now, if I just said now to you, that suddenly it's in the past because I already said it. And you don't know what I'm going to say. So what is you see how you can get sick? And a man cannot lose either the past or the future because he doesn't have it yet. He had it, but it's gone. This guy is a marvelous theoretician, philosopher. These two things then, thou, Marcus, must bear in mind. The one, that all things from eternity are the like forms and they come round in a circle. A circle never ends. The circle is like a perfect geometric shape. And that it makes no difference whether a man shall see the same things during 100 years or 200 or an infinite time. And the second, that the longest liver, not liver, your liver, but the longest person who's lived, and he who will die soonest, they lose the same thing. What do they lose? The present. You should think about this. You should think about this. This is an interesting concept. For the present is the only thing of which a man can be deprived. And if it is true that this is the only thing which he has, and that a man cannot lose a thing if he has it not. You can't lose it if you have it not. And the only thing you really have is the present. The moment. The moment. The time you're spending now. The time you're spending now. We should really spend some time on that, but I'm going to go on. Remember, all is opinion. Ladies and gentlemen, I know some of you are going to say, well, if that's the case, I'm done here. I'm out of here. This is just his bullshit opinion. Well, you may say that, but that doesn't necessarily make it so, because that's just your opinion. And my opinion is different. For what was said by the cynic, hominis is manifest, and manifest too is the use of what was said. And if a man receives what may be got out of it as far as it is true. So the thing there is just to remember everything is an opinion. And so is this. He's telling himself, this is just my opinion. Remember, he doesn't think that anybody's going to read this. 16. The soul of a man does violence to itself. First of all, when it becomes an abscess, and as it were, a tumor on the universe, so far as it can. For to be vexed, to be pissed at anything which happens is a separation of ourselves from nature. This is his stoicism, his stoic philosophy showing through. In part, right, of which the natures of all other things are contained. So when you get vexed, when you get ticked off, you separate yourself from nature. In the next place, the soul does violence to itself when it turns away from any man, or even moves toward him with the intention of injuring him, such as are the souls of those who are angry. There's that anger again coming in, right? If you're angry, you lose control of yourself and you hurt people. And I get you're going to say this is a contradiction because this guy killed a lot of barbarians in the wars, and there were a lot of Romans killed, and there's a lot of death, right? But this is not angry. This is injuring. They're defending themselves. This is war. This is a tough thing to reconcile. And we're going to talk about that in the analysis because it's a big part. It's a big discussion. But remember, he's writing this to himself. He's trying to, frankly, console himself with what he's doing, with what he does every day. In the third place, you do violence to yourself if the soul does violence to itself when it is overpowered by pleasure or pain. There's those two things again. Fourth, when it plays a part and does or says anything insincerely or untruly. When you lie, you're doing violence to yourself. Fifth, when it allows any act, any act of its own or any movement to be without an aim, just to do things, does anything thoughtlessly and without considering what it is being right that even the smallest things be done with reference to an end. Even the smallest thing you do, you have to have an end in sight. And the end of rational animals is to follow the reason and the law of the most ancient city and polity of Rome. Follow the law. Okay. This is worth 4 hours. 17, of human life. I define some words down here of what we're talking about up here if you're interested. Of human life, the time is a point and the substance is in a flux, and the perception dull, and the composition of the whole body subject to putrefaction, and the soul a whirl, and fortune hard to divine, and fame a thing devoid of judgment. Human life is a point. Everything's in flux. Your perceptions are dull. The composition of your body subject to putrefaction, decay, and the soul is in a whirl. And fame is a thing devoid of judgment. Fame. And to say all in a word, everything which belongs to the body is a stream. Heraclitus, all things are flowing. And what belongs to the soul is a dream and vapor. And life is a warfare and a stranger's sojourn journey, and after fame is oblivion. What then is that which is able to conduct the man? Well, says Marcus, one thing and only one: philosophy. So he's basically saying everything's goofy and who cares? The one thing that will able to conduct a man, to guide a man, to help a man, to help a woman, to help all of us is philosophy. But what philosophy consists in keeping the demon within a man free from violence and unharmed. That's the purpose of philosophy. Superior to pains and pleasures. Doing nothing without a purpose, nor yet falsely and with hypocrisy. Not feeling the need of another man's doing and not doing anything. Ignoring people who need help. And besides, accepting all that happens and all that is allotted as coming from thence, coming from the gods, wherever it is, and from whence he himself came, nature. And finally, waiting for death with a cheerful mind. There's those words again. As being nothing else than a dissolution of the elements of which every living being is compounded. This is actually the purpose of philosophy. Surprised I didn't write that down. Philosophy is comprised of keeping the demon within a man. The demon. This is not a bad demon. This is the good demon. This is, by this word, he means his soul, your soul. What is you? Who are you? Who are you? Your inner being, yourself. Right? Do you know who you are? Why do you do what you do? Because you've done it all your life? That's what this guy's trying to tell us, to think about these things. Okay? But as being nothing else than a dissolution of the elements of which every living being is compounded. So it's basically how to face death. But if there is no harm to the elements themselves, in each continually changing in another, why should a man have any apprehension about the change and the dissolution of all the elements? So if there's really, if this is all part of the thing, a part of nature, we live, we die, we don't, well, who cares then, right? For it is according to nature, and nothing is evil which is according to nature. This is Carnutum. Carnutum was a town in Pannonia on one of the sides of the Danube, about 30 miles east, and Antonius remained 3 years here during the war with the Marconi. We talked about this in the analysis of the first part. He's writing this when he's at this warrior at this site, at this warrior's site, at this war. This is the battleground where he wrote these things. Nothing is evil which is according to nature. We can spend 8 hours on this, but we're not going to. We're not going to. You've been reading with Jimmy. And actually, you've been analyzing the second meditation of Marcus Aurelius. That's who we've been reading. You can learn more about Marcus Aurelius by watching our other ongoing videos about his other meditations, the Dirty Dozen, right? And be sure to visit and read other classics on my website. Remember, if you have questions, Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com, Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. Okay, that's my email address. Please email me. And holy mackerel, I hope you really enjoyed this, because I certainly did. Man, I wish I knew this guy. Don't you?